welcome to Arts Express. This is Prairie Miller, and on the show.
You have nice ocean, and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
I'm so sorry, Mr. President. Please, please. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it.
Pathetic.
You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
What's that? Are you kidding me?
You're gambling with World War III.
I need a dollar, dollar. A dollar is what I need. Hey, hey. I need a dollar, dollar. Dollar, it's what I need. Hey, hey.
Let's look at who's actually in power in the United States. Pacifica host Garland Nixon takes a seat at the other side of the table this time as the guest of Take No Prisoners UK host and politician George Galloway, in fact a prior Pacifica host himself on WBAI, together making sense of the explosive world situation and Zelensky at this moment in progress.
Now, Garland Nixon is the savviest of all American commentators, and I'm very glad to say he joins us again now. Welcome back to the show, Garland. Now, you and I are vaguely on the same political page, and we vaguely had the same attitude to one Bernie Sanders. But I saw him talking live to a very different crowd to the crowd he used to talk to, in which he was demanding more war with Russia, more weapons into the war machine against Russia. This Bernie Sanders can't be the same man that you and I used to support, can he?
Well, he can, but, I think one of the things that Americans are learning, and one of the reasons that the Democratic Party is in such a downward spiral, is that you can't, the party that is in power should be the party of the people, the party of the working class. And you cannot be the party of the working class unless you're the party of peace, particularly in a country with 900 bases and $1 trillion budget. The reason we can't have good things, as they say, which would be a strong social safety net, is because all of the money goes into war making. So the Bernie Sanders and his ilk now are demonstrating that for all of the time that they've argued that they were standing on behalf of the working class, the working poor, and the poor, they were really playing both sides of the fence, that it was all a fraud, because he would have to argue for less war and argue to lower the military budget so that money could be used for the people. And Bernie Sanders is clearly a fraud. And when it came down to it, when Bernie Sanders had to make a decision, he's been exposed.
Yeah, it's bitterly disappointing. We had him on our wall of fame, and we took him off it some time ago. But I thought his speech marked a new low. But let's look at who's actually in power now in the United States, and the St. Valentine's Day massacre that J.D. Vance issued to the assembled European panjandrums. On the 14th of February, the special relationship between the United States and Great Britain and the European continent was effectively massacred. He could not have been more harsh to the faces of these European leaders. And now it would appear, I mean, I worked all my life for this, Garland, for an anti-American uprising in Europe. But now that there is an anti-American uprising in Europe, it's America that's right and the Europeans that are wrong. And thus, I said to my old mother, aged 90 yesterday, she said something about me, you'll not get into the United States. I said, I'm now the most pro-American political figure in the United Kingdom, which is actually more or less true. So do they mean it? What are they going to do about it? Are they going to be dissuaded by these barking poodles and chihuahuas, or are they really going for a peace agreement with Russia?
Well, I think we're looking at, it's kind of like when you go to dinner with a friend and his wife and you look and you realize these people are going to get divorced soon. They just can't get along anymore. You see them argue over the whole dinner. That's what we're looking at. It's interesting that the Biden administration and the neocons have been going around the world, attacking and doing all kinds of terrible things and arguing that it was our values, quote, we lead with our values. And how ironic it is that the issue of values is the actual issue that is causing the breakup between the United States and the EU, that ultimately, when it comes down to it, there are people in the United States to a large extent that are concerned with the rights of the individual and the freedoms of the individual. We may, certainly have some significant disagreements with them, particularly when it comes to economic policy, but yet and still there are people that say, we shouldn't, that government overreach is an issue. And to be quite frank, there is the appearance from this side of the pond that Europe is descending into this kind of a woke liberal totalitarianism, and it's quite distasteful. And we cannot continue to be, strongly culturally associated with Europe based on the direction that Europe is going, and we're going in an opposite direction, returning more to our kind of roots, I would say.
So does a summit happen, and Trump agrees with Putin, a settlement, whether the Ukrainian regime and its Western European allies like it or not, and that's the done deal?
Well, recently, President Trump I think it was at the CPAC, which is the Conservative Political Action Committee, he gave a speech and he teased, and his others in his administration have teased that they may expect a settlement as early as this week. I think the important thing to remember is that as a result of, ironically, as a result of going along with the Biden administration, cutting themselves off from cheap Russian energy and other very important necessarily resources that Europe needs from Russia, the United States has considerably more leverage over the European countries than it had prior to the start of the conflict. So that Donald Trump, being a person that will use leverage if he has it, he can put enough leverage, I believe, economically on the European leaders to force them to either go in the direction that he wants or virtually crash their countries. I mean, if he simply says, we're not, all of these things that you get from us, all of these things that you sell to us will be cut off. And furthermore, we have friends that you get, Algeria and Qatar, that you're still getting gas from. We'll talk to our friends and cut all of that up. He has the leverage if he chooses to use it to force Europe into compliance. The question, I think, is, will the goons in Ukraine, are they actors that can be dealt with? What do you do with the people in Ukraine that are irrational and are, let's face it, neo-Nazis? So, but I do think that Europe can and will be forced into compliance. We're already seeing at the CPAC meeting, the leader of Duda, I believe, president or prime minister, whatever, of Poland was there. I believe President Fico was there. The leader, Prime Minister Maloney, spoke there. So we can see that there are people already jumping off the sinking ship of the EU, and I think it's just a matter of time before the rest of them get pressed into compliance, shall we say.
The Polish leader, Dudek, waited for an hour and a half and got a 10-minute meeting with Donald Trump. I mean, even I'm expecting a 10-minute meeting with Donald Trump, and I'm not the president of anywhere. I'm going to the victory celebrations in Moscow in May. Will I really be rubbing shoulders with Donald Trump, standing on top of Lenin's tomb, reviewing the victory parade on May the 9th in Moscow? Is Trump really going to go there? That would be a very big step.
Well, Donald Trump recently has said that he won't be going there, but I wouldn't rule it out because, I mean, the presidents say that, for instance, they're not going to pardon their sons, and then that happens. So, you know, Donald Trump is saying now, he has said that he wants a deal by Easter, and interestingly enough, the traditional, I don't know what you call it, Easter and the Orthodox Easter both fall on the same day this year. So I suspect that he's looking for a deal soon, and that those things could change. You know, Donald Trump, to be standing up front with President Trump, President Putin, and President Xi, who Trump recently referred to as his good friend, I think is a temptation of power that Donald Trump will find very, very, very difficult to resist and turn down.
Yeah, and he could even meet me there. It would be marvelous to see him. Finally, I see that Russia hasn't gone away. You would have thought that after the Hunter Biden laptop being exposed as both true and having been the subject of a high-level deep state cover-up, one of the biggest scandals in American history, involving 50 top intelligence people saying it was Russian propaganda and so on, only for it to turn out to be true. The Mueller inquiry producing zero, the Steele dossier producing zero. It hasn't gone away. I saw someone the other day, a former so-called NSA chief in Kazakhstan, who's presumably on the USAID payroll, singing for his supper, saying that the Russians recruited Donald Trump in 1987 when he was a real estate developer. It just shows you the KGB must have been very far-sighted people indeed. They recruited him and even gave him a code name. He's Agent Krasnov. So some call him President Trump. He'll always be Agent Krasnov to others. Does anyone take that seriously anymore?
No, it's kind of sad, and it's really, really embarrassing, and it just shows the level of desperation that the anti-Trump neocons have come to. I mean, there are plenty, as you know, as left-leaning people, we have plenty of areas where we could make legitimate criticisms of Donald Trump, and certainly in the things that he does that we agree with, we certainly support those. Some things that I think are great as far as foreign policy, but these people are so embarrassing. The good thing is that for the most part, they're on CNN or MSNBC, and since nobody's watching those channels anyway, if we don't discuss it on your channel, nobody would even know that it happened.
I stand chastened by that very wise advice. Is Zelensky running a graft machine? Yes or no? Let me bowl you left field, if I may, about the gold. I'm intrigued that Donald Trump keeps talking about Fort Knox. Is it going to turn out that being as safe as Fort Knox isn't actually all that safe? Is the American gold in Fort Knox? What's Trump on about?
Well, I suspect that the issue of gold is very important in the new monetary policy that Donald Trump and, of course, his very powerful and wealthy supporters are planning to make adjustments to. So, whether or not there's something, amiss in Fort Knox, and whether there's not quite as much gold as there's supposed to be there, it's hard to know that, but I think it is critical. We can see that Musk is looking through the Treasury. We can see that the United States government now is trying to shift from money coming in via taxes, which a lot of people don't understand this. The Congress, particularly the House of Representatives, has the power of the purse for tax dollars. If the government switches to bringing money in by tariffs, that goes into the Treasury, and there's an argument to be made that the executive then has, fairly a powerful ability to control all of that money, and it won't be as restricted by the Congress. So I think there's monetary policy being changed, and whether or not the gold is there is critical to find out how that monetary policy the new monetary policy will be enforced. So it's complicated economically. I've been chasing this down, but it isn't quite as simple as it looks.
Garland Nixon, as always, thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Absolutely brilliant.
And coming up next on Arts Express,
the host of that new show, Alex Wagner, joins us here now. How do you feel?
Very deeply honored to be shepherding through the rest of the week, and I hope that we are able to conduct ourselves with the integrity and the rigor and the just deep thought that you have established in this hour. And it's such a privilege to share the week with you. And that's all I'll say without making myself cry.
Alex Wagner, congratulations.
Rachel Maddow, thank you so much.
I'll be here Mondays. I'm here to help.
And
let me know.
You're invited anytime, Tuesday through Fridays, my sister.
MSNBC host Alex Wagner checks in, or rather out, of her just canceled show, among many others right now, at the economically troubled station, the cross-country investigative Trumpland, and who started out actually with our on-air mentor, Rachel Maddow, herself downsized originally and financially from a daily show to just one, and negotiating the other 4 days to Wagner. And our conversation with Wagner takes place just before her termination, but providing some evidence of what was to come, and what seemed to turn out instead into a kind of doomed requiem for her show. First, a little from Trumpland, then Alex Wagner.
How do you bring people back to the things that tie us together? You are one of the very few people in this country that has managed to hold Mr. Trump accountable. We know that education is the dividing line in American politics. When you first heard Governor DeSantis talk about New College in the context of his war on woke, what was your thought? How do you convince people not just to be angry, but to also be hopeful that things can change?
That is a great question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Alex.
How are you?
Fine. Hi, Alex Wagner, and welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
What can you say about what's been going on at MSNBC with the shakeup since the election and the latest with Chuck Todd and Andrea Mitchell?
Oh, I wish I have nothing to tell you on that front. I feel really good about where we are as a network. I love having Rachel Maddow back in our mix for a limited time. We love her. We're excited about the future. And, we have a best-in-class set of anchors and reporters. And, I'm just really proud to be part of the organization.
Please tell the listeners, what is Trumpland and how would you define Trumpland?
How would I define it?
Yeah, that you came up with this title.
Oh, well, I think, Trump is kind of a huge weather front and encompasses a lot. It's not just the people who are in Washington, D.C., of course, enacting and drafting the policy. It's the people affected by it. So it's Trumpland at this stage. He is the president of the United States. It's effectively a placeholder for the United States, right? I think every corner of our democracy is being touched by the new administration. And so it's really being out in the world in Trumpland, and that's sort of how we came up with a name for it.
How would you define Trumpland?
Trumpland is a podcast that we've put together that features, I think, the stories of the people who are at the center of the new administration's policies and promises. It's a weekly digest of the way in which Trump's agenda is playing out in real time on the ground. And, as part of that, I'm going all over the country and I'm talking to the people who are squarely at the center of the stories, whether that's the pardoned convicts of the January 6th insurrection or federal workers who are at the center of the Musk-Trump purge, or immigrants who are, at the center of the raids that are being conducted in largely blue cities across the country. But it's a real firsthand perspective on, the politics of the day.
And in your journey across the country, what have you discovered that is most unexpected and surprising?
Well, I think there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of anguish. There's also a sense of, I think the American people are remarkably resilient. And there's a lot of, people who are at odds with the administration's agenda will not go quietly into that good night. And very much, I think we're seeing the beginnings of, I'm not going to call it the resistance, because that feels like a sort of stale trope. But I think what you're seeing is the beginning of oppositional forces that are amassing to try and curb what they see as the most destructive instincts of this 47th president. On the same note, among Trump supporters, there's a sense of exhilaration and excitement about what's possible. And to be honest, at this point, given the alacrity and the ambition with which Trump has moved in the first several days, I think that the sky's the limit, and their sense of empowerment is quite profound.
And you've discussed about the election, the reasons you feel Trump won. What are your thoughts, on the other hand, as to why Harris lost, and what issues in that regard the Democrats need to grapple with in the future?
You know what? I'm not a Democratic strategist, so I wouldn't begin to offer a playbook. I think that there are a lot of things that contributed to her loss. But I also think it's important to note that he won, right? You can't just look at it as her loss. You also have to understand that there's a lot about the MAGA agenda that resonated with, men in particular, white men in particular, Latino men. I think the subject of gender is still a very complicated one in the United States. I think the Biden administration would tell you they had a lot of challenges around selling their accomplishments to the American public. I think the abbreviated calendar in which she ran didn't help her at all. And I think, honestly, the Democratic Party is a really big tent. And I think Democrats need to do some real work in terms of sharpening their toolkit and deciding which issues really matter to them the most, and how to manage a coalition that is big enough to include everyone from, AOC to Liz Cheney, right? It's just an enormously big, which could be powerful coalition, but I think they need to really drill down into priorities and spend a lot of time selling them to the American public. At the same time, there are forces larger than just the two-party system in the United States that I think really affected this election. There are global tides that America is not immune to, and I think Trump had a lot to do with that as well.
And you've said that, quote, there is trepidation that inhibits a robust discussion about Israel in the American media due to fears of being denounced as anti-Semitic. What have you tried to do or hope to do to deal with that yourself among your colleagues?
I think you're maybe taking a quote out of context from 15 years ago. Yeah, I gotta say, but I think we are, what's happening in the Middle East is obviously incredibly complicated and very thorny and deeply distressing. As a journalist, we try and do our best to report out all the details and all the, contributing factors that have led us to the devastation that we see today. And I feel, like I said, I'm really proud of where I work. And I think, the people that I work alongside, we all take our jobs very seriously, and we aim to always speak the truth. So, you're always going to get that from me, and you're always going to get that from MSNBC.
And what would you say Trumpland brings to the table that's new and different as opposed to similar news ventures?
Well, I don't really think there are any similar news ventures. I'm not sure that you have unfortunately, I wish there were more people out in the streets, interviewing people and doing field reporting. But I just think, I'm very lucky to work at a place that has dedicated some very serious resources to reporting, not just on camera, but also doing audio in the podcast form. So, I honestly don't know of anything else that does what we do. So in that way, I think what we bring is totally unique to the table.
And has there been any challenges for you in the media as a woman of color? And if so, how have you gone about meeting those challenges and prevailing?
I think it's, I'm just trying to think of a way to answer this succinctly, but I think we are at a moment where we are asking ourselves some big questions about, who deserves to have the microphone. And I don't think that those challenges, I think if anything, the climate around inclusivity has gotten more chilled and more complicated in especially the last year, you could say the last month. And I'm keenly aware of my responsibilities as both a woman and as a, Asian American, part of the community of color, to be honest and truthful and to represent those communities well. And I'm very proud of the fact that, I'm hosting a primetime show in cable as I think one of the only Asian Americans doing that. But nothing is easy, right? You just always have to, I think part of it is like you have to retain a sense of resilience and tenacity and also empathy and kindness and to do your work with honor and capacity that is, to be big in terms of like your heart and your ambitions and your sense of empathy. I think that that's how I've tried to conduct myself professionally. And I think it's worked for me. And I encourage other people to cultivate those things as they try and make their way through the world, whether in media or elsewhere.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Alex Wagner, for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello, hello, hello. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Hello. My name is Polly Vandersma, and I'm a Girl Friday. Well, actually, I became a Person Friday a couple years ago. I didn't change the job very much. Anyways, my new boss was a curator. She loved to talk about art things. I could never really talk to them about all the things I think about sometimes. And all the things I've seen.
Hello, Arts Express. This is Patricia Rosema, and I'm inviting you to see my first film, I've Heard the Mermaids Singing. This is Patricia Rosema.
Gosh, sometimes I think my head is like a gas tank. You have to be really careful what you put into it, because it might just affect the whole system. I mean, isn't life the strangest thing you ever seen?
And coming up next on the show.
There's an office and a building and a person and a chair, and you paid for it all, though you may be unaware. You paid for the paper, you paid for the phone, you paid for everything they need to deny you what you're owed. There ain't no you in United Health, there ain't no me in the company, there ain't no us in the private trust. There's hardly humans in humanity. Now the procedure that you're needing ain't the cost-effective route, and only 2% of people end up winning a dispute. So if you get sick, pray to God for health, 'cause your doctor's gotta pray to United Health. Way back in 77, Mr. Richard T. Burke started buying HMOs, putting federal grants to work, made 50 billion buckaroos. Last year the Warren Buffett of health, the Jeff Bezos of fear. Now CEOs come and go, and one just went. The ingredients you got, bake the cake you get. But if you get sick, cross your fingers for luck, 'cause old Richard T. Burke ain't giving up. Commoditized health, monopolized fraud. Here's the doctors we own and the research we bought. They own the pharmacies and a lot of the meds. They should start buying graves to sell us when we're all dead. There ain't no you in United Health, there ain't no me in the company, there ain't no us in the private trust.
And that's from the song called United Health, written and sung by Jesse Wells. Hi, this is Jack Shalom. Luigi Mangione was charged with the killing of the United Healthcare CEO on December 9th. Only 2 days later, singer-songwriter Jesse Wells had already posted onto YouTube the song we just played, United Health. That song video got passed around very quickly, And as soon as I heard the song, I thought, like many others, wow, who is this guy? Because Jesse Wells has got a voice like John Prine, plays guitar like Bob Dylan, and can write a song that's as topical and clever as the songs of Phil Ochs or Tom Paxton or Woody Guthrie. It turns out, despite his handsome, shaggy-haired, baby-faced look, Jesse Wells has been making songs for a long time. And in an age where so much music is artificially created with plastic lyrics and digitally manipulated instruments, it is refreshing to hear a protest song on a simple acoustic folk guitar that doesn't just talk about generalities, but actually names names and has a political point of view. I clicked on a few more of Jesse's YouTube videos, and it turned out that he had put out dozens of YouTube videos in the past year alone, all of them with him playing acoustic guitar in some outdoor backwoods setting. Songs about fentanyl, payola, cancer, war, Walmart, all with killer specifics. His songs are personal, political, playful, and serious as all hell, and prolific. Every week it seems there's a new Jesse song on YouTube, and after listening to song after song, I realized this guy was not just a good songwriter, but maybe a great one. His song, War Isn't Murder, which I'll play now, I think it's the best anti-war song I've heard in the last 50 years. Take a listen.
War isn't murder, good men don't die, children don't starve, and all the women survive. War isn't murder, that's what they say, and you're fighting the devil, murder's okay. War isn't murder, they're called casualties, there ain't a veteran with a good night's sleep. Let's talk about dead people, I mean a dead people. The dead don't feel honor, they don't feel that brave, they don't feel avenged, they're lucky if they got graves. Call your dead mother, ask her when she died, it's a deathly silence on the other line. The dead don't talk, but their children don't forget, so in 20 short years you could live to regret that. War isn't murder, there's money at stake, yeah, even Kushner agrees it's good at real estate. War isn't murder, ask Netanyahu, he's got a psalm for that, he's got a bomb for you. War isn't murder, it's an old desert faith, it's a nation state sanctioned righteous hate. Let's talk about dead people, I mean a dead people. War isn't murder, it's the vengeance of God. If you can't see the bodies, they don't blow when they rot, and the flies don't swarm, and the children don't cry. If war isn't murder, good men don't die. So in a short 20 years where you vacation the strip, try not and think about the dead, and have a nice trip. War isn't murder, let's all give thanks. I saw it all in a movie, give it up for Tom Hanks. War isn't murder, they don't ship out the poor, and the bullets they fire ain't part of the cure. War isn't murder, land is a right, but the bank's called dibs, it's something you can't fight. Let's talk about dead people, I mean a dead people, the dead don't feel honored.
My favorite lyric there. War isn't murder, ask Netanyahu. He's got a psalm for that. He's got a bomb for you. Well, that's about as savage a line I'm going to hear in an American song this year. And the call out of Tom Hanks, wow, that was just wonderful. Jesse gets exactly what Tom Hanks's propaganda role is all about. But Wells doesn't just write overtly political songs. Like John Prine, he can take the vicissitudes of everyday current American life and break your heart with it. Wells grew up in Ozark, Arkansas 30 years ago, and he saw people around him struggling every day to pull their lives together. Now listen to this great song called The Grapes of Wrath. You can call it political or not, but you never doubt that his sympathies lie with the working class people he writes about.
I know your son is handicapped, and it can't be easy. All the useless platitudes we they'll say on the way to our evening. I've seen some brand name hate on some generic human beings. People say they want to change, but they don't know what they mean. You can never know a loss like the gaping wound inside you. Gnawing at your mind, every building you walk into. If I sing a song of joy, who the hell would believe? If I press the grapes of wrath, is the juice even worth the squeeze? I know you loved your dad, and now he's dead. Y'all had some stuff to sort out, now it won't get said. I've seen some brand name hate in some generic human beings. People say they want to change, but they don't know what they mean. You can never know a loss like the gaping wound inside you. Gnawing on your mind, every building you walk into. If I sing a song of joy, who the hell would believe? If I press the grapes of wrath, is the juice even worth the squeeze?
There are many talented musicians out there, and of course, whether they make it depends so much on luck. Jesse is starting to blow up now after a long time working at it. It seems that this is the right moment for him. With the dissatisfaction with electoral politics sweeping across the nation and folks looking for something authentic in this ever-increasing AI world, Jesse has stumbled onto what may be his Bob Dylan moment in more ways than one. At least his Bob Dylan moment is defined by that damn movie. With all due respect to the artists involved, the main thing that film is going to do is to spread and frame a narrative about what one needs to do in this country to become famous and to become a real artist. Put away your childish, inauthentic political feelings and express yourself as a real artist by going electric and singing songs about how phony and rotten your girlfriends are. Well, that narrative is how you get famous in America and get taken seriously, at least according to the mainstream media. And you can already see that happening with the recent New York Times piece on Jesse. I gotta say, I was surprised to hear that they had a piece on him already, but when I saw the headline, I immediately saw what the Times was up to. What they wanted to focus on in the article was how Jesse's next album wasn't going to be overtly topical. So the headline was, Jesse Wells, a folk musician who sings the news, is turning the page. In other words, the New York Times just can't wait until he gives up that adolescent politics nonsense and puts down his folk guitar and picks up his electric. But the joke is on the Times because, in a way, the Wells trajectory is actually a reverse Dylan journey. Wells already had bands in his early 20s that were electric guitar, metal-type rock bands in the style of the Grateful Dead and Nirvana. And you can see early videos of him shredding his electric guitar like nobody's business. But it was only after the death of his father that Wells turned more seriously to the acoustic guitar and political songs. So now he's on a national and European tour playing mid-sized clubs, including here in New York, where he played lots of his political songs. And his fans know all the words. And the final irony of this all is that Jesse just won the Newport Folk Festival's John Prine Songwriter Fellowship, and he'll be playing in July at the Newport Folk Festival. Will Bobby Zimmerman be there to cheer him on? Inquiring minds want to know. Of course, an artist has to continue to grow and experiment, and no one expects Jesse to be doing the same thing forever. But I have a feeling that Jesse Wells is aiming straight dead on for the heart of the truth, and that he knows that's where his power comes from. And he isn't going to give that up easily just to satisfy some mainstream narrative. So let's close now with a powerful Jesse Wells song called Slaves. This is Jack Shalom for Arts Express with host Prairie Miller.
Slaves picking cocoa off a plant down in Ghana. Slaves, Nestle got a good deal on the farm. Yeah, slaves mining cobalt in a pit in the Congo. Slaves making environmentally friendly cars go. Slaves on the highway trying not to get hit. In Alabama in orange jumpsuits picking up rent. Slaves in plain sight in the U.S. of A. Slaves, well, at least they let them out for the day. Slaves sewing gussets in a factory. Slaves sewing clothes for you and me. Slaves never quit 'cause they're so damn afraid. Yeah, in an Amazon warehouse out in Saudi Arabia.
And now on Arts Express.
This is Bro on the Global Cultural Beat, Breaking Glass. Today's episode, Social Democratic Vienna versus ever more rapidly liberalizing Paris. With European sovereignty under attack from Donald Trump and his national security plunderers, advisors, it's still refreshing to note that there are at least oases of the old continent's social democracy which stand against the ever more powerful encroachment of American neoliberal domination. One of those cases and oases is Vienna, where the hard-fought gains of the socialist movement of the 1920s still endure. Vienna, long the most, but now for the first time in decades voted the second most livable city on the planet behind Zurich, still boasts a gleaming public transportation system with trams, buses, and subways crisscrossing every block, with escalators in those metros increasing ease of travel for the elderly and disabled, and with police presence at a minimum. This is in contrast, for example, to ever more liberalizing Paris with its more run-down transportation system, either lack of or out-of-service escalators, all marked by the piercing and constant sounds of police sirens at all hours, disrupting pedestrian and traffic flow. The latter being the sign of that most prescient mark of a neoliberal regime, income disparity, as the gendarmes are more and more required to police the discontent of a recalcitrant working and underclass over widening inequality. Vienna's diversity and changing makeup is apparent in its food. The Innenstadt, the central city inside the ring, remains a conservative marker of Habsburg order, though there is neoliberalizing presence here, where what was once a glorious Turkish restaurant in Swedenplatz is now a gourmet American-style restaurant called Habsburger. Just outside the ring, though, in an area comparable to Paris's 11th arrondissement, there is a great deal of culinary experimentation, with the nearly mile-long open-air Maria-Hilferstrasse suddenly transforming at its end, furthest from the ring, into a series of all kinds of Asian restaurants and an Asian grocery. This is the area nearest the Westbahnhof, the international rail system that brings visitors and immigrants to the city. The end of Maria Hilferstrasse also boasts one of the city's best Greek restaurants, Mythos. Its succulent cheeses and newly added vegetarian menu proving why, in a recent Time Out survey, Greek food surpassed Italian as the world's highest rated. The other end of the trail also houses Turkis, with a branch near the Stephansdom Cathedral in the city center. The Turkis menu includes braised lamb and chicken and an abundance of mixed dishes in its salad plates. Food in Vienna, consisting of all kinds of seeded brown breads and vegetarian spreads, is healthier than Paris's white flour baguettes and croissants. The inner city, of course, is the cafe capital of the world. There's nothing like the old world elegance and out-of-this-world pastry and coffees of the grand cafes, foremost among them being Café Central, where Trotsky is said to have planned the Russian Revolution, and Café Mozart, not only the traditional meeting ground of the city's musicians, partly because of its location just a few steps from the Staatsoper, one of the world's finest opera houses, but also home to Freud's writing and psychoanalysis circle. Paris, in contrast, is constantly in the process of losing its cafes and bistros, now declared a national monument, to specialty coffee shops, which have become not places of exchange, but work centers and tourist locales, with a decor designed to better accommodate selfies. The far right may be poised to now take over the government, but Vienna again remains a cosmopolitan oasis, with Austria as a whole rejecting the drive toward war with Russia that fuels the continent's elites as more and more money is diverted away from aiding their own working classes and funneled into the war machine, all the while fueling ultranationalist ressentiment as immigrants, not the oligarchs, are blamed for Europe's problems. Austria, meanwhile, clings stubbornly to its neutrality, a position handed down to it from the last Cold War to this one. Part of what makes the city so livable, of course, is its museums, theaters, concert halls, and cinema retrospectives. But there was this past holiday season and continues to be much to choose from. There's always a blockbuster show at the Kunsthistorische, or Art History Museum, and this year's features Rembrandt, which opened with a meticulous miniature of an Amsterdam street scene, followed by a tableau of John the Baptist preaching, and the stunning longing and yearning of a woman in bed awaiting her lover, tabbed as Sarah Expecting Tobias. The exhibition also featured a contemporary Hoogstraten, who spent time in Vienna. The pairing was somewhat unfortunate, though enlightening. Hoogstraten's trompe-l'oeil deceptions were pitted against or compared to Rembrandt's, in whose rendering a young girl extends her hands over the picture frame to create the trick of depth extending out of the frame. But Rembrandt's luscious concentration on the orange folds of the girl's dress and the look of mixed amazement and consternation on her face far exceeds Hoogstraten's what seemed like cheap effect at 3D imitation without the master's humanity. The exhibition, by the way, then leads into the museum's Bruegel collection with, among others, its stupefying Fight Between Carnival and Lent, a compendium of peasant enthusiasm and excess in the former and forced piety in the latter. Another blockbuster was at the lesser-known Kunstforum, site of a former Austrian bank, which houses an exhibition on Gauguin Unexpected. The unexpected elements, besides a recounting of Breton peasant life, were the artist's reliefs and sculptures, as well as paintings of Tahitian life. Gauguin's encounter was very mixed, since he impregnated, then left 2 underage girls, but also published Le Sourire, The Smile, the title meant sarcastically, his anti-colonial broadside containing his own writings and etchings highlighting the brutality of the French administration in both Tahiti and the Marquesa Islands. The city's second most prestigious museum, the Albertina, is given over to Chagall, with his wondrous pictorial account of his early life in the Jewish peasant village of Vitebsk. Chagall was initially a featured artist after the Russian Revolution, but his peasant magical realism ran afoul of the extremely didactic abstract suprematist Kazimir Malevich, and he left the country. A pity, because had he stayed and been incorporated into the dialogue, his innate feel for the peasantry, but in a modernist cubist sense, would have been a bridge between the revolutionary Russian avant-garde and the pedestrian socialist realism that was to follow. In the basement of the Albertina is a collection of the New York artist Robert Longo, whose black and white hyper-realist murals painted from journalistic photos resound across the decades, be they cops beating demonstrators or, most strikingly, a series of paintings from Freud's house in Vienna as he was fleeing the Nazis in 1938, including an eerie one with a swastika plastered across the entrance of his building at 19 Bergasse. Probably the most stunning exhibition in the midst of a daily declining West was Alfred Cuban's drawings in the Albertina Modern about his own encounter with death and dying, early in life of his mother, then of finding bodies washed up in the river near his Bohemian town, then of his first lover. Stark images abound, including those of a pregnant woman standing next to a grave, a George Grosz-like fat bourgeois with two naked women on either side of him, and the epitome of his work, an ape, another version of misogynist power, devouring a naked woman. The etchings, many just after the turn of the century, powerfully forecast a century of war and destruction. Finally, one could not help but be struck by the gap between the big-budget spectacular Wicked, which, with its overly cautious, self-congratulatory hyping of its green-black witch as outsider, might better have been titled Timid or Limpid or Flaccid, and another more spectacular intervention. The musical in 3D at the Hayden Theater, named for its proximity to the composer's house. In the end of Part 1, since there's another money-making Part 2 coming, reverts to a Marvel superhero-style origin story of the Wizard of Oz, revealing how the witch acquired her costume, her broomstick, and her flying monkeys, even as she betrays her friend, the good White Witch, in going it alone. Much more to the point this holiday season and beyond was Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter extravaganza at the Houston, Texas halftime show on Netflix, available on YouTube. The songs from an album, shunned by the country western establishment but later awarded the Grammy for Best Country Album, featured the singer riding into the stadium on a white stallion, part Joan of Arc, part Lady Godiva, descending and launching into the Beatles' Blackbird, reminding us of the civil rights meaning of that song, and then Beyoncé's Style covering Dolly Parton's Jolene, in a much more pointed denunciation and kicking to the curb of her betrayer. This was all capped off with an array of black cowboys and cowgirls as Beyoncé reclaimed a black space in country music, a genre that her research revealed had originally been initiated by Negro performers. Her bold insertion into a previously forbidden space, that the mealy-mouthed, smirkingly liberal corporate Wicked, and seeing both in Vienna illustrated how the city itself, while retaining its social democratic past, was also moving into an uncertain future, but one potentially filled with promise, as it sheds phony liberalism or corporate equity for more hard-won actual equality. This is Bro on the Global Cultural Beat, Breaking Glass.
And that's all we have time for today on Arts Express, expression in the arts. And if you'd like to express yourself too, you can write to us at theradiogoddess@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Prairie Miller leaving the station.